Hello and a very warm welcome, and sorry for the delay from the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe. My name is Sebastian SCHÄFFER. I'm going to be the moderator for this event on the parliamentary elections in North Macedonia. And I have with me one of our two cooperation partners. We organized this together with the Renner-Institut and the Politische Akademie. And I have Gerhard MARCHL with me, who is going to present us the briefing on the elections in North Macedonia, while we in the back are sorting out the last technical difficulties, and then hopefully can start with the panel discussion. So I will postpone the introduction of our panelists and will hand directly over to Gerhard to present us some information about the upcoming elections. Gerhard.
Thank you, Sebastian. Good afternoon also from my side, and a warm welcome. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Karl-Renner-Institut, the IDM, and the Politische Akademie of the ÖVP. I'm Gerhard MARCHL, and I'm responsible for European affairs at the Karl-Renner-Institut. This event belongs to a series of discussions organized by these three institutions, in which we focus on the situation in the forefront of parliamentary elections in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe countries. You might have noticed that within less than 4 weeks, 3 countries hold parliamentary elections in the region. Serbia started in mid-June, Croatia followed about a week ago, and this Wednesday, so the day after tomorrow, North Macedonia will vote for a new parliament. All this is happening amid of the COVID-19 pandemic. And let me remind you that in North Macedonia, between 100 and 200 persons are tested positive for corona every day. So the pandemic is still going on in the region, and especially also in North Macedonia. All 3 institutions, so the Karl-Renner-Institut, the IDM, and the Politische Akademie, have a special interest in the Western Balkans. For the IDM, I would say Southeastern Europe belongs to its mission. For the Karl-Renner-Institut, and I dare say also for the Politische Akademie, the Western Balkans are in the core of their international activities. Let me bring an example concerning the Karl-Renner-Institut. We are co-founder of the initiative Young Generations for the New Balkans 2030. This is an initiative which sets the spotlight on youth and their progressive stances and hopes for the future. In addition, we have been organizing several events on the situation and the developments in Southeastern Europe. We have close contacts to partners in the region, and we've been supporting democratic and progressive forces in the region for many years now. All this has to be seen in the context of close ties between Austria and the Western Balkans. In history and nowadays, as you know, Austria is one of the strongest advocates of the EU accession of these countries. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our events have to take place online, but we very much hope that the discussion on Montenegro at the end of August may already take place at Press Club Concordia. We would very much look forward if this is possible. I've already mentioned that this event is the result of a joint initiative, and I would like to thank our partners, the IDM, the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, especially Sebastian SCHÄFFER, the Managing Director, and also Ms. Silvia Nachivan. And on the other side, many thanks to the Political Academy of the ÖVP, especially to Felix Ofner and Lorenz Jan. Many thanks to all for the good cooperation, as always. Since the beginning of this year, I've been providing a briefing on the situation in the respective country, not only as an integral part of the event itself, but also in written form, available before the elections and enriched by the results after the elections. This time, in the case of North Macedonia, I myself have prepared this briefing and I would like to present it now. So, what's the situation in North Macedonia 2 days ahead of the parliamentary elections? What is important to know is that also in North Macedonia, these elections are snap elections. Snap elections that had to be postponed. How come? On 3rd of January 2020, so at the beginning of this year, the then Prime Minister Zoran Zaev resigned. Zaev is the leader of the Social Democratic Union of Macedonia, SDSM is the abbreviation, and now, since then, a caretaker government led by Oliver Spasovski, also a social democrat, is leading the country. As required by law, the primary task of this transition government is to organize fair, democratic, and credible parliamentary elections. These elections were to take place on 12th of April, so already 3 months ago. But then the COVID-19 pandemic reached also North Macedonia, and these elections had to be postponed. This came in a very bad moment, in an inopportune moment. The parliament was already dissolved, and the caretaker government could not function as a real government. President Pendarovski declared a 30-day state of emergency mid-March and prolonged it 3 times. And by doing so, the government was able to take over the legislative function and to issue decree laws. Another consequence of the pandemic was that the elections were postponed. I already mentioned that. And what followed was also a heated debate when the elections could take place. And about mid-June, a compromise was found that the elections were to hold on 15th of July. And also mid-June, on 12th of June to be exact, President Pendarovski lifted the state of emergency. What about the caretaker government? How is it formed and what's the composition of it? As I said, it's Oliver Spasovski who is Prime Minister at the moment. He is also a social democrat, and the caretaker government is largely reflects the previous government of Zoran Zaev, but there's an important difference. The main opposition party, the VMRO, DPMNE, this abbreviation stands for Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, Democratic Party for Macedonian National Unity. So this party, the main opposition party, nominated several ministers, deputy ministers. Amongst the others, the Minister for Internal Affairs. So this means the main parties, the Social Democrats, the Conservative Party, and also the main Albanian party have to cooperate, at least to some extent. This is a huge challenge for the main parties, at least, given that the political landscape in North Macedonia has been divided for many years. This division has been closely linked to longtime Prime Minister Gruevski, who fled to Hungary. You might remember this story. He led some controversial identity politics, and after some scandals, wiretapping scandals and large-scale protests, Gruevski had to resign in January 2016. Later in 2016, his party took the first place in the elections. Let me share the results of the of the 2016 elections. I hope you can see them now. So the VMRO, DBMNE made the first place. The Social Democrats under Zoran Zaev, as the leader, was more or less the secret winner of the party with almost 37.9%. And Zaev, after lengthy negotiations, was able to form a government, a coalition government, with the Democratic Union for Integration and the Alliance for Albanians. And this was after several months. This government was formed in May 2017. Let me come to the balance of Zaev's term of office. What did he achieve? What was not achieved? When he came to power, he announced to reform the country in a different way, with more democracy, more freedom, and more justice. He was quite successful in this. The European Commission, in its progress report, assessed the reforms positively, also did the Freedom House, but still some critical issues remain, especially the country's struggle with corruption. The so-called record extortion about 1 year ago in summer 2019 proved this, and this scandal also cast some shadows over Zaev and his party. The North Macedonian economy performed quite well under Zaev. GDP growth was at around 3% or even higher. Unemployment went down, but remained on a quite high level with about 16% in 2019. And still, every year, around 20,000 people leave the country, above all young people. We have to bear in mind that hundreds of thousands of North Macedonians already live abroad. So, yeah, emigration, it was and is still a huge issue, also for North Macedonia. One of the main objectives of Zaev and his government was to unblock the beginning of EU accession talks. The major precondition for this was to solve the name dispute with Greece, and Zaev was ready for a painful compromise. In June 2018, he and his Greek counterpart Alexis Tsipras signed the so-called Prespa agreement. This solved the name dispute, and the country had to be renamed from Republic of Macedonia to Republic of North Macedonia. In return, Greece accepted to support North Macedonia's EU and NATO accession. We'll hear later about this, but in short, in the country itself, the treaty and the renaming of the country were heavily criticized, but in the end, a two-thirds majority in parliament approved the constitutional changes that were necessary. But, as you know, at least at first sight, all these efforts did not bring the desired success, at least not immediately. In October 2019, the EU decided to delay the start of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. So the decision was blocked, especially by France, and the hopes of Zaev and his governments and many North Macedonians were not fulfilled. This was a major blow for the government of Zaev and the European ambitions of the country overall, and this was also the main reason for Zaev's resignation at the beginning of this year. Only afterwards, in March, the Prespa agreement and the renaming of the country bear fruit. On 24th of March, the EU Council gave finally green light to the beginning of EU accession talks. And 3 days later, North Macedonia became NATO member. So in March, two important events happened for North Macedonia. Let me turn now to the current election campaign. What dominates the election campaign? There's, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and all its negative consequences. And there is still the deep cleavage between the Social Democrats and the DPMNE party, between the main parties. I've already mentioned that the country is facing a second spike of COVID-19 infections. Prohibitive measures and restrictions had to be reinstated, and this gives, of course, room for many political debates. The Conservative Party, although present in the Caretaker Government, is heavily criticizing the government and especially the Minister for Healthcare. And COVID-19 also led to a worrying deterioration of the relationship between Orthodox Christians, mainly ethnic Macedonians, and Muslims, mainly ethnic Albanians. So between the two largest religious groups in the country. Because Orthodox Christians feel a bit discriminated against, and also due to the fact that family gatherings during Ramadan provoked many new infections. Also, the economic outlook changed dramatically because of COVID-19. The government had to take a wide range of measures in order to mitigate the negative effects, and these measures are quite similar to measures taken in countries such as Austria. The renaming of the country still remains a contentious issue. The VMRO DPMNE party still rejects the agreement with Greece. And another element of the electoral campaign during the last weeks and months are the developments among the parties which represent ethnic Albanians. Let me remind you that the ethnic Albanians make up roughly a quarter of North Macedonia's population of 2.1 million. And this is also why Albanian parties often play a crucial role in the formation of coalitions. I already mentioned the Democratic Union for Integration under Ali Ahmeti. It has been junior party in various governments in 18 of the last 20 years. Let us have a look at the slide. Here you can see the parties and all the main candidates and their affiliation, the political ideology. So there are other Albanian parties who challenge the leading role of the Democratic Union. There is the Alliance for Albanians and the Alternative Party. They joined forces and formed an alliance. And what is more important, the Social Democrats formed also an alliance, an election alliance with the BESA movement, another ethnic Albanian faction. And this is the first time that there is an alliance between a Macedonian party and an ethnic Albanian faction. So, having said this, what about polls and the outcome of the parliamentary elections? There are not many reliable surveys, but there is one, I would say, published by the National Democratic Institute, a US democracy development organization. And according to this poll, yes, thank you for the slide. According to this poll, as you can see, the SDSM, so that the Social Democratic-led movement, a BESA movement, alliance is slightly ahead of the alliance led by Vienna or TPMNE. It also shows, this survey also shows that the electorate is quite disappointed of politics. As you can see, many voters are still undecided. Many other people will not participate. So yeah, we have to be quite curious what these elections will bring. As you might have noticed, the party colors are a bit misleading. In North Macedonia, the Social Democrats have dark blue as party colors, and the Conservatives have red. So this was my introduction, my briefing to the situation in North Macedonia. Having said this, I would like to return the floor to Sebastian, and I'm curious to listen to the inputs of our experts.
Yeah, thank you so much for providing us with an overview. And I think we have now the perfect basis to discuss with our panel. But before I introduce them, I would also welcome, of course, our guests who are watching, and draw your attention to the possibility to ask questions via the chat function in this room. Make use of it. We're going to start the panel discussion in a second, and then type your questions in whatever you're interested in, and I will pick them up if possible. So let's see.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we still don't have a picture. You can see us?
No.
Okay, something's happening now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, while we are doing this, maybe I take the opportunity to introduce our already visible panel guest. And I'm gonna
run ID cam.
Okay, we're gonna mute this for a second and start with our first panel discussant, which is Sofia Maria Zartanakis. She is working at the AIES in Vienna. She's a research fellow there and the associate researcher at the European Council on Foreign Relations. She works especially on the topic of European integration, focuses mainly on EU foreign, security and defense policy, and concentrates on Greece and Turkey, as well as other bilateral relations. So, Sophia, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Hello.
Thank you. And we have with us Stefani SPIROVSKA, who is the president of the Youth Educational Forum in Skopje. So a warm welcome as well to our panel discussions. Thank you for being here.
Hello, and thank you for having me here as well.
And last but not least, we have with us Milan Miyakovic, who hopefully has solved the microphone problems. Milan Miyakovic is a Austrian-Macedonian architect, artist, and author. He teaches at the Technical University in Wien and also at the Johannes Kepler University in Linz. Thank you very much for being with us. Okay, we can't hear you at the moment, but we see a very interesting picture. I'm gonna come to this while you sort this out.
Can you hear us now?
Now we can hear you. So warm welcome once again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're happy to be with you. We're a little bit surprised, to be honest, about, we thought this is an art project, yeah? So in this case, we are representing the potential of fine art that is contributing to the potential of democracy. What you see here is Milan Mijakovic, whose body is present, and all his mental contributions to democracy. He is a visionary. Yeah. So we're a little bit surprised with all the statistics that you gave us, you know. So we are coming from a different viewpoint, and we are very happy to contribute a position of fine arts to this very fine discussion. We're happy that you're having us. We're broadcasting live from a gallery in the center of Vienna, in the first district, which is right on the other side of the Museum of Applied Arts. So what you see here in this gallery, it is run by Vladimir Matsura and David Matsura, his son, very famous art collectors, where we're working together with. Milan Mijakovic's body is present here, and his mental contributions to democracy can be seen on the walls. I will run you through the different works and the positions that this work is kind of put together from. Yeah,
it's important that we know that you're the voice.
I am the voice of Milan Mijakovic for this discussion, unless he decides to talk again. Yeah? So far, I will contribute my interpretation of his works.
Thank you very much. This is a surprise for us as well. I mean, discussion is a form of art, and I'm very happy to have something like this with us. It's something that hasn't happened before in our coverage of the parliamentary elections, and I think this can be a very interesting contribution to our discussion. I would like to start with the first question, and my first question is for Sophia. We have heard about the Prespa agreement. You are working on the relationship between Greece and now North Macedonia. So I would be interested in your opinion about how this issue is still shaping the current parliamentary election campaign, because it was a very long process that led to an end, that led to an outcome. What are your observations from these negotiations, and how will that influence the debates of the parliamentary elections?
Well, thank you very much for this question. I saw in the chat that my video is very dark. I cannot do anything about that. I'm sorry. It's the only spot. Quite convenient, but I hope you can hear me at least, right? Because some people... Okay, perfect. So the Prespa agreement, it is a very odd topic, especially for someone who is an outsider and not directly involved. It's very hard for people to relate to what those two populations are going through or went through. But I will try to shed some light on this. I think that although the agreement was signed and ratified, and it's been already a couple of years now, it will be an important topic now as well in the elections coming up, because we have to keep in mind that the people did not back them. Neither did the people of North Macedonia, nor did the people of Greece. They were strictly against it. We had protests on the streets, anti-government slogans of betrayal on both sides. And as a result, obviously, neither of those two governments is currently in office. So it will be kind of a test, I think, of support for these pro-EU policies of the government of Zoran Zaev back in the day. And we will see if this will bear the fruit that people say, okay, we went through some hurdles, we gave up, we gave some concessions, we changed our name, we changed names of our airports, of our highways, and many, many other things. And then the EU said, no, it's not time to start accession negotiations yet. Then they changed their mind. And now we will see if all this back and forth and this kind of painful road will bear fruit in the end and have the support of the people to say, okay, we decided on that path. Let's continue with the hopes that eventually sooner rather than later, we will be part of the EU and the door will be more open than it was right after the agreement was signed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would be interested, as Sophia now said, she observed it as more of an outsider. I would like to ask Stefani, who is on the spot, how do you observe the situation, and especially if we look at the last elections that now are all more or less grouped together in the region. For whatever reason, we can discuss this also later on, that the youth did not as much participate because there was no relation to the offerings that the parties have made. How is the situation concerning the discussion about the name of the country, and especially with regards to the youth in the region?
So yeah, thank you. When we talk about young people and elections in general, we always come to the same conclusion that we lack political participation among young people because we lack democratic culture and we lack that political culture among young people. And that's not something that occurs only during elections, but it's something that is part of young people's lives, starting from their schools, then on their municipality level, then on national level, and then when it comes to elections, most of the time they feel excluded. And recently we had a research that showed this, saying that young people do not believe that the institutions care about their needs, that the institutions or the political system in general takes into consideration where do they stand and how should they create the policies in accordance to their position and their standing. So that would be the answer from me why young people are rather being apathic when it comes to making this sort of decisions. And if we look back when we had the debate about the change of the name, and then we had the debate about, when the referendum was taking place, then the debate was mainly in the field of should we give up on something in order to gain something that we have been expecting for a long time. Because when you take a look into what do young people expect here, they certainly expect to become part of the European Union. And then again, if you ask them in what time will we become part of the European Union, then they have really unrealistic expectations, which again points the light or makes it even more clear that there are some, I would say, holes, but missings in the educational system and in how we raise our next generations and their activity and participation in general in processes. Also, it was interesting recently. The Westminster Foundation for Democracy in North Macedonia and Skopje did a research on. Actually, they analyzed the list of the candidates in this elections, and the average age in all the lists was 42 years old, which shows us again how much the young people are actually included in this sort of crucial processes and putting them on very important positions, or at least giving them space to create policies. Because one thing we know for sure, that during the creation of the programs of the parties, young people haven't really been consulted a lot. So in general, there is lack both of inclusion, of trust among young people, and that results in apathy, I would say, from the young people. I think I answered the question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. So now I would like to ask the voice of Milan Mijakovic, with relations and challenges that are arising from this discussion about the name of the country and the changes with this. What would be an artistic approach towards the challenges that have been arisen from this? We don't, at least I don't hear anything at the moment. Your microphone is muted.
Okay. As you saw, the confetti is showing us. Yeah. As you see, the confetti is showing us that we see the.
You must do it again.
You must do it again. Okay. Yes. Now you can hear us. We see democracy as a big celebration, and Macedonia is a pilot project of the art project of potentially imagining what democracy could be like for us. So art is introducing the unforeseeable into the play of, otherwise we would always introduce the same and reproduce the past. We don't want to reproduce the past because democracy is as old as humanity. The Democrat has the big mouth and the big black mouth with which showing the unknown. He is representing all the unknown because a democratic speaker will always try to find out the truth and not represent what he already knows and try to persuade people. Those are Democrats, which we call false Democrats. So Milan Mijakovic's work is taking a lot of care on reflecting how these different elements of honesty can be actually and lies can be found and also improved and prosecuted. What you see in the back here is Milan Mijakovic taking over responsibility for all catastrophes that ever happened in nature.
Not ever, 2,000 years.
2,000 years is enough, and you can buy a share of it. You can buy responsibility, so which is very important. We need to take responsibility for all the actions that happen around us in our very present reality.
And then you can start.
And then you can start doing art, and then you can start behaving as a true democrat. Because if you look in the back of this here, you will see a work which is posing and showing that it's very important to have an inclusion of everything. So the animate, the inanimate, and all is included in our understanding of humanity.
It's also showing that they are mixing everything.
It is also showing that everything is mixed up at the end of the day.
We have a sophistical way of speaking.
We have a sophistical way of speaking. And if you look at humanity itself, you see a human being here, an overseen person. These feet are 30,000 years old. And this face is the expression of today's knowledge of culture and the refinement that democracy can show. So
she was speaking about the youngsters.
So the whole setup is that we want to introduce that as a minority, as a majority of the Democrats. So we think that we also want the black people to vote, yeah? And we want to give everybody a voice. If you speak about the young people nowadays, Milan Mijakovic did a research on the internet, and he found a young Macedonian kid, not older than 5 years, sniffing glue. I mean, when this is telling the story, these people, he's probably dead, and these people should govern the country, because these people are the minority which can become a voice of Macedonia. So Macedonia as a democratic art project is supposed to involve everyone. This is our position.
The poorest, the hopeless should cover it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Show the picture of the kid once again.
I showed it again.
And then the picture of the Democrat.
Let me show you the picture again.
I'm gonna.
These are the kids we're talking about, and this is the Democrat addressing the unknown.
I think we understood. The good thing is we're recording as well, so we will have to have a possibility to go back to the pictures that you have shown.
Yeah, let's do that. So then
Do we have questions?
Do you have any questions?
Just, I would like to ask. I would like to show a question that has been posed. Because the question was raised, if there are any percentage polls, how many of the North Macedonian population are against the Prespa agreement? And I would like to ask anyone who might be in position of such data to respond.
May I briefly cut in?
Yeah.
Well, the only polls that I have in my possession are from the beginning of this year, before the outbreak of COVID-19. And it's, again, Gerhard mentioned it before, the National Democratic Institute. And it says that things are rather balanced when it comes to supporting or not supporting the agreement. It was, I think, 31% against and 30% are for it, or vice versa. So it's not very much in favor. So like 3 in 10 people, I think, are supporting it.
I see.
But that's the only poll I have in my possession. Yes.
Okay. And Stefani, do you have any more insights towards that?
I don't really have any particular numbers regarding the perception of how many people are for or against, but I can say that the turnout in the elections, actually on the referendum, when the change of the name was part of the question, it was pretty low. So I would say that people were at least uncertain regarding that. So I don't have anything exact to add, but I can just give that perspective that people were either staying away from making the decision, or were really uncertain on what they want or do not want.
All right. Let's maybe focus a bit on a different topic that is important in the election. And one of the main challenges that will be out there, that we will not see a majority for any of the 2 big parties. So that will mean that they will have to be in a coalition. And my question for Stefani would be, there are discussions going on that one of the possibilities could be, and Gerhard mentioned that the Albanian minority parties always played an important role during the last years in the politics of North Macedonia. So there are discussions going on that maybe a possibility to get out of, to get the majority would be that the North Macedonian, the next North Macedonian Prime Minister could come from the Albanian minority. Do you think that that this is something that will shape the election? Is this something that is discussed? And what do you think is going to happen in the next 3 days? We actually started election already due to the COVID measures today, and the real election day for the general public will be on Wednesday. Huh?
Yeah, that's true. So the election days, this time, or these elections, there are 3 election days in comparison to every other elections, when there are only 2 days for casting a vote. So basically, in the first day, the people in hospitals and the prisoners vote, and on the second day, everyone else. But now we have 1 extra day, which which was added because there are many people in self-isolation, and there are also more people in the hospitals. Regarding the question about who is going to win or what the results would look like, there are several opinion surveys available in the public, and I recently came across an analysis, which was that depending on who is standing behind the survey, there is a different result. And the discussion was mainly about if the media is giving the right information, because in case they're shaping the information, then they should be held responsible for that. But however, the results are, or the opinion surveys are, either 4% for the current government, so, or 2.5% for the opposition. So depending on who's behind that, those are the results. In both cases, in both scenarios, the results are pretty close, so we can take that for sure. And when we're talking about the coalitions and about who's going to form a government with whom, there's one interesting thing since 2001 till now, and it's called the Frame Agreement. So the Ohrid Frame Agreement was basically designed to solve the systematic discrimination, I would say, or the possibility to left one ethnic group out of the coalition forming and government forming and so on. So basically, each and every time we have, since 2001 till today, we have coalition which is formed, or government which is formed between Macedonians and Albanians in the governing majority. So I couldn't say for sure who's going to make the coalition with whom, but we're definitely going to have that respecting the framework agreement for sure. Another thing that people expect now, it's quick forming of the government, because we need functional institutions and we need like to overcome this pre-electoral period, which makes kind of everything more slow. And I suppose that the government will be formed kind of following all the procedures and not having additional things to wait for until it starts working.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can follow up with the questions that have been raised by the audience. So as I understand, one of the, so you would say that there is a possibility that one of the minority parties would also be into go into a coalition with Renewal, or the party bloc that is formed by VMRO.
Once we have the results on the election day, I think things would start to open and become more clear then. But for now, I think there is a possibility for that, yes.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about numbers, do you have also numbers on the expected outcome for this election, and then even more specifically between the North Macedonians and the Albanian minority?
Well, it depends, but what we know for sure is that people are more skeptic due to the COVID crisis. So we need to take that into consideration, and that could definitely influence the turnout on these elections. And in comparison to the situations in the region, like if we take, for an example, Serbia, and the numbers of the COVID cases before the elections, there was a significant drop of the numbers. And I would say that here, like let's take, for instance, the previous week, which was 1 week before the elections, we had one of the greatest numbers of COVID cases, which leads me to the point that we have the real data at all time point given. And that could definitely influence the people who are considered and afraid for their health, and that could also influence their decision if they would go out and vote on the election day or not. So if the last data we have for turnout was from the referendum, when people were deciding a very specific question, this time I think that the COVID would play a significant role regarding how comfortable would people feel to go out and cast their vote.
Thank you. Sophia, the challenge for the Zaev government, or now we would have to say the previous government, as we have the caretaker government at the moment in place, was that they have tied their political success to the negotiation process of becoming an EU member. Now we have the situation that these snap elections would have fallen into a time period where it was not yet clear if they the blocking from especially the French President Macron would prevent this. Then the COVID pandemic broke out, and we have now the situation that the blocking from the side of the European Union to not open negotiations yet has been lifted. But at the same time, we also see already the economic results, and also I don't know if this would be a security question as well, but nevertheless, influences from the pandemic on the economy and also on the public health security in the country. What would your assessment be concerning the potential outcome of the election. Did the postponement due to the COVID pandemic help Zaev and his party to probably win this election, or doesn't it matter at all, and other things will be determining the outcome?
Well, that's hard to say. I think it's difficult to answer with certainty when it comes to that question. But I would say it's going to be difficult anyway. Even if the elections were held like 2 or 3 months before, it still would have been difficult to win, especially with like a huge distance from the others. The European Union did, in my opinion, did not handle the situation as good as it could have been, and it might have caused more trouble than help in the long run. By this whole reforming the accession process, and no, you're not ready yet, although we pressured you to change your name, to sign the Prespa agreement, and so on and so forth. So it remains to be seen. I mean, 2 more days and then we will know if it was the good timing or not. But I mean, the situation that the country finds itself in is a very particular one, a very specific one, because you have now to deal with the pandemic, being a small country, being a relatively poor country, being dependent on the EU also for financial assistance, for aid, to be able to cope with the whole situation. And then you have also to deal with a new framework, or a changed framework for accession negotiations, which would be complicated and difficult anyway, without having to think about recovering from a global pandemic, recovering from the economy, and the backlash is there. So it's a very difficult situation for the country, I would say. And I don't think a few months before or after would have made that much of a difference. Maybe now that we're a bit closer to saying, yeah, it looks pretty good now to open the negotiations for real, maybe this would be like a kind of a small turning point to say, okay, there is a fair chance that the Social Democrats will take the lead by some percentage points. But I cannot be certain of this.
Thank you very much. So I've seen quite some activity in the background, and I would like to ask the voice of Milan Miyakovic. You have to unmute if you want to also chip into the discussion, and maybe you can read out what you just showed into the camera for our plenary.
Art is strong when art is still. We would like to ask you, because you're talking a lot about things you already know. It's the part that is actually a little bit boring for us, and I think also for the future of democracy, because democracy is living a lot of potential. So now, if we take Macedonia as an art project to improve all of democracy for humanity, we should talk about the things that you don't know yet. And we would like to talk about the things where you see the biggest potential to improve the democratic consciousness of the conscious mind of the people, which are already very much involved, but they don't have a voice yet. So how can we give everyone a voice?
We are living in a sophisticated time.
We're living in a sophisticated time.
The sophists are governing again.
And the sophists are governing again.
Not the philosophers.
Not the philosophers.
Because the sophists are not interested in the truth.
Because the sophists, they are not interested in the truth.
But they are interested only.
But they're interested only in persuasion. Persuasion of what they already know. So this is something that is blocking the democratic process. Yeah. So we see it today and now. This is not bringing anything forward. Yeah. So how can we improve in the truth seeking of the democratic process? Everybody is repeating what we already know. And so,
okay, thank you very much. I think it's a good point that we are also should talk about further challenges for the democratic development of the country. Although we are not necessarily talking about what we already know, because we don't know the electoral outcome yet. So in that sense, we of course tackle questions that are being there, but nevertheless with a certain uncertainty. But I would like to use the remark that has been made by the voice of Milan Miyakovic, that there is a great debate in all of our democratic systems, that there is a challenge for disinformation and also for threatening the political system with various influences. And I would be very much interested in how much this is actually an issue in the North Macedonian parliamentary elections. Stefani, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about how disinformation is also shaping the current electoral campaign, and how much this is also something that comes from an external influence, or is it rather something that is happening within the country?
It's an interesting phenomenon on how whenever something very I don't know, strange or threatening is happening, we have a tendency to say that someone from abroad is doing that to us. So that's something that we always blame to outside of the country. But when we talk about misinformation, that's definitely a problem we have been facing for several years. I mean, and it's directly related to the development of social media. So from the very moment that people have started informing themselves from social media, there is, I would say, a significant rise of fake news, because there is, I would say, less opportunity of fake news within the traditional media, such as newspaper or the TV news. There is a significant amount of disinformation, especially at this pre-electoral time. And it's mainly related to the either wiretaped materials, either related to the party programs, and so on and so forth. And I would say that is because we lack two things. One is responsibility among the media and among the journalists that stand behind the news that are let publicly. And the other thing is that we lack media literacy. So all of the research and the analysis show that young people lack these skills, particularly for two things: not only to inform themselves, but also to protect themselves. And this is an interesting topic, and it's a bit more distant with what we are talking about today. But if we take, for example, the online education and everything that's now being transferred online, we still miss this crucial part, such as protection online and also being more media literate and so on and so forth. And I would say that this information is a serious threat, and we have mainly non-government organizations that work a lot in this field, not only to raise awareness about the existence of misinformation and disinformation, but also to do a little bit of fact-checking in order to really alarm or ring the alarm if something fake is circulating and it's affecting people's opinion. So yes, the spirit has been very fragile in that regard, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Sophia, how would you evaluate external factors contributing to the threat of democracy, or even supporting democracy, when we look at the situation that is present in the country?
When you say external factors, do you mean external actors, or what exactly do you mean?
I would say, I would sum up with this, of course, on the one hand side, the support that is coming from the European Union, and the possibility to have this integration. And on the other hand side, of course, external actors that might contribute to this information, even if the voice of Milan Miyakovic says fake news are not existing, but it's rather a lack of understanding. Maybe we can take that into consideration. What do you say about the claim here? If people would understand better how disinformation works, then there would be no fake news.
I think fake news would be there even if people would understand better. But in order to have people understand the fake news better, or to spot them easier, someone has to give them the necessary tools and education, as Stefani rightly mentioned, and raise awareness. And that's a progress that takes time. So maybe Milan himself could elaborate a bit more on how we could raise the understanding of fake news. I can only speak from the European Union perspective, from the European perspective, which definitely is the fact that we need to keep the Western Balkans close, and not just North Macedonia, but in general, the whole area. We need to keep them close to Europe, and eventually also integrate them into the club, if I may use this word, which I don't really like, but yes. So that would be one way to also counter this strategic, political, economic vacuum that might establish in case the relationship between those two, the EU and the Western Balkans / North Macedonia, is damaged, because we have actors in the back who are interested in the region, who are meddling in the region, who are engaged. We have China with the Belt and Road Initiative and the economic assistance, which is rather limited to the economic factor, at least for now, and not just spreading to political engagement and other things. We have Russia. We always have had Russia, who is not very pleased with the fact that a lot of countries have joined NATO now from the area, and the EU is getting closer and closer to those countries now. So there are definitely factors here and there that the EU needs to consider, because if we don't move with determination now, and don't have a clear path, like this is what we're going to do and this is the timeline that we want to do it in, then we will for sure face some alienation and other actors engaging more and taking over.
When we talk about the European Union, I would add one of the questions that have been raised by our audience, and then get back to the claim about the fake news. So when Macron said no, the EU tried to send a more positive message to North Macedonia. And how was that perceived? Was it noted, ignored, or did these promises, despite all, play a role in the campaign? Maybe Stefani can pick up that question.
Yeah, so I would say that it was a source of disappointment, because people felt like they gave up a lot of things for something that's very significant for them, and that they received an answer they weren't expecting, especially in a period where the imaginary checklist of the country on its way towards the European Union was being very tidy and everything was checked. But what is more interesting is that when we received the positive answer recently for opening the negotiating process, it didn't really get as much attention as it could, because the COVID crisis were very strong at that time and people were more focused on their health rather than on the EU integration. But if I have to answer, or if I should answer, how was the French no perceived? I would say that it was a real source of disappointment, because people were expecting yes at that particular time. But it's good that after a short period we received a positive answer, so now things are starting to move into the right direction, or that's how people feel. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to do a research on how young people feel at that particular time point, and if that was going to make them more active or more apathic in the entire political process. But I think that the work we're going to do in the upcoming months will show us where do they stand now, so we can make a correlation with the current yes or opening or green light, let's say, and the data we have from before the decision when we received the no.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that there is this distinction clear between that it's not the European Union that is blocking this, but it's part of its member states who are doing this? Or is it hard to make that distinction by the general public?
At the end of the day, I think that people perceive France as a very important part of the European Union. So I would say that it's kind of one same thing. But what I would say is a positive thing here is that the disappointment did not result into making people more like being whatever if we become part of the European Union or not. So it did not change the perception of the value of the European Union and the security and everything that it brings with itself. But it was rather a disappointment of, are we going to wait as much as we have been waiting so far? So in that regard, that's the answer. But when we have to make a distinguishment between the France and the European Union, I would say that it's more or less the same thing, because the French decision is a big and significant part of the European Union's decision. COVID is an opportunity to include the unknown. I agree.
We'll pick that up in a second, but first I would also like to ask Sophia that question in that sense. Is it a challenge from the perspective of the European Union that single member states influence the fate of other potential and candidate countries, and especially when we think about the situation that North Macedonia has been affected by this, first by Greece blocking accession negotiations and also accession to NATO, and now France, at least temporarily, influencing that process. Is that a challenge for the European Union foreign policy, since there is still this unanimity necessary when it comes to those big decisions?
It is definitely a challenge, definitely. And it also shows that there are some elements that you cannot quite predict, because for a long time it was just blamed on Greece because they used their veto. They said, no, we don't want them in NATO. We don't want them in the European Union. For many, many, many years, as we all know, it went on for decades. So once the Greeks could no longer exercise that veto because they had reached some kind of compromise, we see that still there might be other actors, other member states who come up and say, yeah, well, no, because this and that. And it was not just France. It was France who was in the forefront, obviously, and everyone concentrated on France, but also the Netherlands were not very, very happy about the whole situation with the accession process, and I think Denmark as well. So we have islands of member states here and there who might come up and say, no, we're strictly against it. And that's definitely a challenge because it affects the whole of the European Union. And as Stefani said, there is a difficulty. It's difficult to distinguish between like the EU and Brussels and then, yeah, France. You cannot just blame it on France. France is one of the now two big players of the European Union, with the United Kingdom gone. You just have France and Germany. And if one of the big ones, of the two big ones, says no because we have some objections, then obviously that will influence the whole of the EU's foreign policy and foreign action. But nevertheless, it's a good thing that it did not influence the willingness of the country to join the EU eventually. And if I also may add one small remark, it's not that once you say we start negotiation on the accession, that after like a month, a year, you can enter the European Union. It is a process that can take years and years. But after like these hurdles and name changes and things that can be painful for a country to make, it would have been a nice factor of credibility. I think that's the word that would sum it up, that the European Union also seems like a credible actor to trust. Like if we deliver, then you deliver as well.
And it's, I mean, we have seen that to a certain extend also with the discussion between the two big players, Germany and France, when it came to the accession and the start of the negotiations back in 2005 with Turkey, when Sarkozy and Merkel said, well, we want to ask the people after the whole process went through, which is not something that is primarily directed towards the candidate country, but it's rather directed towards the internal audience of those countries. And there's a real danger that on the expense of foreign policy, internal policies of the EU member states are made. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, Turkey is an example. I would not like to compare North Macedonia with the things that are going on in Turkey, but the one thing that you can compare is the fact that you cannot always expect a country to knock on the door without giving them something, without saying, yeah, okay, now it's time, now we move one step ahead. You don't necessarily have to move 10 steps ahead, but like one step at a time, you need to also show them that you're being serious. It's not just a rhetoric. Like, we want to include the Western Balkans. We have the Western Balkan summits like we did 2 years ago in Sofia, but then nothing tangible happens. That's something you cannot do for years and years without expecting consequences, like we said before, with other actors taking over in these areas.
Right. Okay, we have the comment that was raised by Franz-Lothar Altmann that we should come back to the this upcoming elections. It's feeling that we are going a bit astray, although I think that this is also an important part with relation to the future after the elections. But nevertheless, he wants to know about economics, environment, education, foreign politics, and dealing with the COVID-19. And I would like to ask Stefani, what are, apart from the things that we have discussed, internal aspects of that election, and also maybe here to include what has also been posed, is that do the minority parties, the Albanian minority parties, differentiate in certain aspects here, so that you clearly can see differences when it comes to these policies?
Okay, so if we need to name what should the priorities be after the crisis, or after the crisis and after the elections, actually, the crisis is still going to be here. I would say that definitely economics and education and also the environment are burning issues that are still going to remain here around us, especially education, because that's the field where I work in. So my organization is pretty much focused on youth policies and education, and we see that there are many things like decreasing the level of quality they should be having. When we talk about differentiating the Albanian parties, of course there are some differences, but if you look a bit closely, it's kind of hard to see who's offering what, because the culture of debating before the elections is still not well developed, I would say. And since recently we see several of the representatives or several parties have their representatives present in the public debate almost always, but there is lack of public debate in order to see who's offering who, especially at times when the political programs or the programs for these elections are not really available or available in both languages, so in Macedonian and Albanian. Okay, but how do the main parties differentiate on these issues? May I ask on which issues, if you could type?
I think the issues that you have been mentioned, environmental protection, education, etc.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's
I think that's a yes.
Right. Okay. There are not many well-developed plans on the protection of the environment, and that's a problem we're always facing during winter. So now it's a bit so it's not that important at this particular moment before the elections, but every winter we have the same problem with the air pollution and everything that it brings with itself. So we didn't really get clear offers on who's going to do what on that field. Then when we talk about education, they're all saying that they're going to bring more quality education, but how are we going to do that? We don't really see a clear vision on it. So I would say that more or less the parties are like highlighting the burning issues, although I can speak only about the programs that are publicly available and available in both languages and that have been already discussed. But they're not really clear plans for all of the things I've mentioned so far.
Raising the minimum wage is also something that has been discussed. Huh?
Yeah, that was something that was discussed, and mainly between SDSM and VMRO. And there was a very curious thing that after you do the calculations, the raise of the minimum wage that VMRO was offering was actually lower than the current minimum wage. So that was, I think, a very curious thing, because if you are the average person who is going to vote and who would not really sit down and calculate everything on paper and be well informed, then you could make a badly informed decision. So that was one of the curious things that were part of this times. Yeah.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we will soon have to come to an end of our discussion, and so I would use this opportunity for one last round, and I would like to give the floor again to the voice of Milan Miyakovic. How do you see, apart from the things that you have raised right now, that we are in the unknown and that we need to talk about things that we haven't raised yet, and that we all should go out to vote, if I interpreted your visual input that you have given over the past couple of minutes correctly, what else can we expect from an artistic point of view after this election? And you have to unmute your microphone, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. May we ask to get the last word, please? Because we would like to close the discussion.
Andreas,
yes.
I would like to know who are we speaking with? Are they communists, Democrats, or anarchists? Who are they? Please, can you ask?
Yeah. So, the voice of Milan Miyakovic.
Why are they not giving us to speak?
We would like to know who you are. Are you Democrats? Are you Christians? Are you anarchists?
Or communists?
Or communists? How would you describe yourself, every single one?
So we can understand this kind of talk, because for us it's really strange.
So we would like to understand this kind of talk, because for us, from the point of view of art, it's very strange to only talk about what happened already and to repeat yourself,
so
finding out problems instead of talking about opportunities. You know? COVID-19 was a huge opportunity to involve everybody, because everybody
wanted to
get involved. So we would like to know who you are. Okay? Are you communists? Are you anarchists?
Yeah.
Are you Democrats? Are you Christians?
First,
okay, I'm gonna mute you again here, and then I would tell you that I wouldn't want to describe myself with one of the labels that you presented, but if I would have to choose one of them, I would definitely be a Democrat. My final question, and I will give you the floor maybe one more time, but the last word will always be with the moderator in a second. But let me ask you, Stefani, very briefly, please, what do you expect after the election? What will be the future of North Macedonia?
That's kind of a hard question, but if I have to say what should the first thing that we will work on be, I would say that combating the COVID crisis, definitely. And now we have more relaxed measures. I expect for the measures to be at least kind of more intense, I would say that, and definitely focusing on the things that have suffered mostly in the recent period. So that could be both unemployment, quality of education. Then further on, it would be the environment protection and so on and so forth. But most of all, I would expect functional institutions that are going to be committed to their particular role in the society, because that's, I would say, what we lack most, especially at times like this when almost more than 5 months, I would say, we have dissolved parliament. So we definitely need strong parliament who is going to cooperate from within and is going to bring to vote on good laws and enabling us to function as a society, I would say, definitely.
Thank you very much. Sophia, the outcome and the future of the elections, what do you think from a EU perspective? What will this election mean for the further European integration?
Well, very, very briefly, to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that these elections will show if there will be a continuation of the reform process that has been initiated in the last elections of December 2016, when the Social Democrats took power, so to say, and we'll see if this process of democratic reform and the road towards the EU will continue after the 15th of July, or if we'll have some kind of stagnation, maybe. I hope
Thank you very much. And now the voice of Milan Mijakovic. Unmute your microphone for one last very brief comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the end, we would just like to point out that the democratic debate, as it is supposed to be, is by hearing the inner voice, will start after this conversation is over, where everybody can hear himself more clearly, and we hope that we have a contribution to give you some thoughts that are not included in your package. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have this very interesting panel together with us. The last couple of months have brought a lot of new things for the challenges and opportunities that we, as the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, have experienced. We have had many first experiences and many new experiences. And so I'm very glad that I still can be surprised, because if you think that this was something that was planned, I can tell you I was as much as surprised as probably everyone else. But anyway, it's something that we definitely will continue in the future, and maybe also see some other surprises. But let's now simply wait what the outcome of the elections will be. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you, Stefani. Good luck. Stay healthy also during the difficult voting process. Sophia, thank you very much for joining us and enlightening us and sharing your insights from your work. I'm looking forward to continue this discussion in different formats. And also, of course, thank you very much to Milan Miyakovic and his artistic performance that brought a different aspect to our panel discussion. Stay healthy, follow our activities, and as Gerhard mentioned in the very beginning, we're going to continue this format and look forward to analyze the elections in Montenegro somewhere in August. Take care and bye-bye.